All right, I'm recording now, and I will go on mute. For those of you who are listening to the session, please use the chat window if you want to ask any questions, and we will go through them at the end of the session. Thanks a lot. Have at it.
All right. Thanks, Brett, for the opportunity to speak to you guys. I am a database architect, a Microsoft certified professional. For those that don't know, I just recently moved to the Raleigh area. In fact, I've only been here about 6 weeks, so thank you for the ice storm. I am more used to powder snow, not the chunky ice stuff, but hey, that's okay. We'll deal with it because I don't have to leave the house, so that's good. So tonight we're going to talk about protecting the company jewels. And let me see if I can get all this stuff working over here, get on the right screen here. Like I said, I work in Knightdale, North Carolina, even though my company is in Denver, Colorado. So they were very gracious of me to allow me to move out here and to work 100% remote. So it's kind of nice on days like today. I am the leader, as Brent said, of the TriPASS Virtualization Virtual Chapter. There are lots of virtual chapters, so if you have not gone out to the TriPASS website to look and see what's out there, very, very informative information. We do record it every single month, so there's a lot of historical stuff. If you're into virtualization, David Clee, for us, has done a 100, 200, 300, and 400 series, and he's probably the most pronounced guy in the virtualization space of Sql Server. I was the past president of the Denver Sql Server user group while we lived there many years ago. And of course, I've spoken in many various locations on SQL Saturdays. And I did put in for Richmond, but didn't get selected. That's all right. All right, lost jewels. So what are the company jewels? It's basically the company data. Can your company survive? Can your company live without their company data? And most of the time, the answer is no. You've got customer data. You've got invoice data. You might have a bank, might have credit card data or bank account data. We sure hope they don't lose that. And then we look at how many data breaches have we had recently. Target, and here we have Anthem Blue Shield. Just recently, it's like, come on, guys, it's like our job. It's our job actually to protect this data. And why we're not protecting it, I don't know, because, the thing of it is these data attacks can come from both internal employee access, people that are trying to be malicious internally, as well as externally hackers. So, we need to kind of get our act together, and these guys that aren't protecting the data, they should be having a pink slip to the door, and I'm surprised they probably do. So if you're not protecting your data, one day if you get hacked, do you have your resume ready? So, and then also, has your data ever been compromised? Mine has, at least 3 or 4 times. And when I'm out talking to people, I'm talking to friends and stuff, they're like going, what do you do? And I tell them what I'm doing, and, we talk about data hacks and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like going, I actually subscribe to one of the services to, notify me anytime my credit reports changed or whatever, because I know that, your data is everywhere. There is no getting around it. Not only does the NSA have it, who knows who else has it? I'm sure the Russians even have it somewhere. So we need to be on the defensive. So what are some of the protection requirements that we're required to protect from? Well, I would say pretty much every single database out there that I'm aware of is probably going to have some type of personal identifiable information, or we'll call it for short PII data. PII data is going to be data that can basically point back to you. There are rules, there are government rules that basically that when you're dealing with personal PII data that you've got to protect it. If you move it from production to a scrub environment or to a QA environment or wherever it may be, you've got to go through and you've got to change that data to where that it cannot, under any circumstances, get back to the person that the data belongs to and stuff. And then you also have, of course, SAS-70 audits. I've been through, I used to work for myself. I worked for a credit card company for 17 years, and you know, we went through SAS-70. That's just the rules that you as a company sets up and says, we're going to abide by these rules, and they come back in and then, of course, audit you and see if you're doing what they say that you're doing. Also, the payment card industry, we sure hope they're protecting it, but Target didn't do a very good job. You know, Target did a horrible job. You know, all of our data, you know, many of us got credit cards reissued. HIPAA, yeah, there you go, Anthem Blue Shield. Then, of course, Sarbanes-Oxley. And I don't know whether you noticed, but I actually worked overseas for 18 months. And one of the things that I even had to deal with is the European Union Data Protection Directive. So, you know, can your data leave this United States? Sometimes the answer is no, and you have to have a data center somewhere, you know, to protect that and everything. So we definitely even have to look at that. So how are we going to protect the jewels? You know, the jewels are, you know, it's just like the jewels in your home. You just leave those open and ready for the thief on the street to go steal your data. So we're going to talk about and see if we can get through all this tonight. I've kind of changed this whole presentation up, so we'll see exactly how far we get and stuff. But how do we protect the company jewels? Here's basically going to be the agenda. Number one is we need to encrypt the data, whether it be SQL Server encryption or whether it be some third-party encryption. We need to do something about it and actually protect the data. Now, in SQL Server, transparent data encryption, where we get to in a moment, we can either encrypt the entire database or we can encrypt individual fields. Then the other part of it is audit access. So even though you have this data encrypted, who can see it? Yes, your DBA can see the data. Someone is going to be able to see that data. You know, you're going to have areas that you've got to go look at, and someone goes, hey, I need you to go look at Joe Small's information and tell me what's wrong with it, and he can't log in, and maybe you're using the Social Security number as an first time identifiable information for the person to get in to match them. You know, would I agree to that? No, but I inherited it. So I've got that particular scenario in my office. Yeah, so sometimes I've got to go in there and go, yeah, I've got his right Social Security number, or no, I don't. You might also have encrypted something like salary information. Do you carry salary information in your database? The company I work for, we actually have an HR system, human resource system. And yes, we've got salary information in there. And they don't look too keenly on, because we even have our own company, you know, we is in our system. They don't look too keenly on us knowing basically someone else's salary. So we need to find out, number one is who's accessing the data. When did that user access that data? And how did the user access that data? And when I say how, basically is what select statement did he use? We'll get into the auditing, SQL auditing, a little bit later on, but one thing with SQL auditing to remember is that, at least the last time I looked at it, and I think it's still this way, is that they don't go down to the field level. They only go down to the table level currently. So, for example, if you had a people table or a person table, and you actually ended up having in there say the Social Security number, well, if someone just did a select for name, first name, last name, and the address, they're going to show up in this audit report, but you at least know that, oh, okay, they didn't do anything all they did was basically go in there and get this information. They're not actually looking at the encrypted data. So you can prove to the auditor that this guy did not touch that encrypted data. And then when you get that done, when you get the auditing done, the other thing you'll want to do is turn on policy-based management. You'll want to monitor settings. One of the things you want to monitor, and one guy asked me this last year when I changed the encryption certificate in our production database, he's like, well, why don't you just put it out there 5 years? And I'm like, well, because I won't remember when it changes. So every year, and it's a good practice anyway, a lot of auditors told me they would prefer you to change things yearly, because we go in and change our encryption certificate signage every year. And then what about moving data to non-production environments? Can you do that? And the answer is yes, and we'll hopefully talk about scrubbing data also, how we scrub data, how we move a production encrypted system into a non-production system. And you do have to do some work there to do that. And then also, hopefully we'll get to it, high availability of encrypted data. What do you do with always on? Can you bring always on into the picture? And the answer is yes, you can. So let's get started a little bit more and get into encrypting the data. So transparent data encryption, when you use it, it encrypts not only the data files, but it also encrypts, of course, the log files and the backup files. So it's going to encrypt everything on you. And it's really important to remember that when you encrypt the backups, one thing that we discovered, and luckily we were going to a brand new server, so we had plenty of disk space, is when we encrypted the data for the first time at my previous employer, we actually ended up increasing the size of the backup exponentially. Basically, it was a 600 gig database, and we had light speed going on, and we had reduced it down to maybe 15 gig or something like that out of a 600 gig database. Well, lo and behold, as soon as we turned on data encryption, guess what happened? We could not compress the file anymore, and we ended up having a 600 gig backup file. That was fun to move around. So just remember that, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more in a moment. Now, I talked about a while ago, you can do cell-level encryption. And at this current employer, not only do we do the entire database, we also do cell-level encryption also. Now, the one thing we don't have at our current employer is the extensible key management systems. And you can secure it in two different ways. You can secure it by a certificate, and it gets a little bit more difficult to do that, to get the separation of duties. But the other way to do it is if you're a big operation and you do really need the separation of duties, then you can do some EKM software or HSM hardware. And what that basically is just hardware that you can tie into SQL Server that basically manages your keys for you, your encryption keys. So that's just something we're not going to talk too much about it. Even in the employer I was with, which was, they had credit cards galore, they didn't even buy the hardware. We were definitely talking about it many times to buy it, but they never did. So the other thing to remember is when you're using transparent encryption, pull out your checkbook, because you're going to have to use the enterprise edition of the software. You cannot do this on standard, so it's going to cost you money if you need it. Now, transparent data encryption, we talked about just a moment ago, what happens to our backups. They're now encrypted, but they cannot be compressed. So if you were looking at encryption and compression together, it's just don't even turn it on because it barely even compresses it. So you're just wasting time if you're trying to do both. And the other thing to remember is with Lightspeed, when we used to use it at the old company, they had object level recovery. Well, if you've got your backups and everything encrypted, you're going to lose that object level recovery ability. You will no longer be able to create an object level recovery. Now, for those that aren't familiar with it, Lightspeed will give you the ability, and I believe it's still true from what I've seen other software, the ability to say, for example, if you are losing a table, someone went in and did an update on your inventory table, and instead of changing a price on one item in your inventory, he changed the entire inventory table. Well, with object level recovery, you could go stand that table up right beside your current inventory table and then just bring it across and update it and get it all fixed very quickly. Well, you're going to lose that if you go with the encryption. What about restoring the database? Well, this is where not only restoring locally, but also restoring on a scrub server to bring into your QA and UAT. First of all, I'm going to tell you, on all your different keys that we're going to see, and you're going to see me back them up, backup, backup, backup. Do not do a backup. Yes, I used a double negative to hopefully get your attention. Be sure and always back up every single bit of encryption. There is no back door to get to that data if you lose it. And then when you're backing up and you're transferring the data to somewhere else, we're going to be talking about, do you need your master service key? And we'll talk about each key in just a moment. Do you need the master key? There's 2 keys already. Do you need the certificate? There's 3 keys already, 3 different types of data that you need. So let's swing over and let's kind of start doing a demo. Let me see if I can switch the screen over here and see if I'm actually on the correct screen here. And go to my other monitor. And hopefully you guys, Brett, tell me if you can see it or you can't see my SQL Server screen now. I think you should be able to based upon what I'm seeing.
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this database called T-SQL 2012. And if you haven't taken your querying test yet, you'll recognize that that's one of the databases that they use. So when we're looking at the database, there are several different things to notice as we're going to go through them. Okay. So we're going to talk about your symmetric keys, and what we're going to do first of all is look and see is any database encrypted with encryption keys? And the one thing to note is because I've already had encryption turned on this particular server, you do have tempdb is encrypted. When you encrypt your very first database on a server, it will turn around and encrypt tempdb. Okay, so you can, once you get it all off, and I don't know whether I have the script to do it, but you can get tempdb out of encryption if you turned everything off like it shows here. Then you can also, another command you can actually do is you can go to the database and you can go look and say, okay, what's encrypted? Now it's interesting when you look at this and you go look at it and go, well, wait a minute. tempdb says it's not encrypted. I can't give you an answer of why Microsoft reports it 2 different ways. someone out there might have an answer. If they do, we'll look at it in just a moment. So if I got everything off the system like I should have right before we started, everything will work. These commands will work, so just FYI, if we blow up, it's because I didn't get something off the system. So we're going to look at it. So first of all, remember I said backup, backup, backup. This is your service master key. That is going to be one of the things that is installed with the server. You will actually want to get that thing backed up to a drive so that you have it and back it up with a password. Let me get, not quite got it all highlighted there. Now you'll notice that the error message we get is that Windows policy requirements haven't been met. They're not complex enough. So that's one thing, that when you're given it a password, you do have to meet the Windows requirements. So let me just select down to the next one that does meet the requirements. And it's now backed up that service master key in the location I've told it to go to. So if we look at our drive, you can see right there that we have the service master key. The very next thing you want to do is, if your database doesn't already have one, and this is where I think we're probably going to blow up because it's probably already there, but you'll want to create a master key. If you try to go run other items like create a certificate, for example, and you have not created your master key, the error message you're going to get is going to be create your master key. Okay, so let's just see if I've got it off there. And no, it says I've already got it. So you can't override it, so that's okay, but you'll notice right there it's telling me, Tom, you've already done it, don't do it again. So the next thing you want to do is, after you create that master key, is you'll want to turn around and actually back it up. Like I said, back up, back up, back up. Now, if you do a tape backup or you do a disk to another location backup and you have a DR set up, make sure that these backups get in all locations. Every night, my tape backup guy, or is actually on disk, he's told to back these up every single night so that we make sure that we have them. Now, the next thing you'll want to do is, once you do that, now this is going to be for an entire database backup, is you'll want to go in and create a certificate. Now, the other way you could do it is if you did have the hardware information. With the way I'm doing it here, I'm not specifying how long the certificate is supposed to last. By default, it is 1 year. So let's go ahead and see if I got that one off. Nope, that one's okay. And if you're looking for the certificate, you're like going, well, where is it? You can actually come over into the master database. You can look in certificates and security, and right there's the certificate that we just created. Okay? So that is very, very important that you have that there. Now, once you attach that certificate to a database, you cannot delete it. Lo and behold, when it first came out, you could. And I did one time on the production server, and it was a mess to get it back. But I got it all back. And I kept my job. I don't know how, but I did. All right, so the next thing we do is, like I said a while ago, after we get the certificate, we back it up. Okay, so now if I look at my hard drive, I should have 3 files. Oh, wait a minute, I have 4 files. Why do I have 4 files? Well, you'll notice here that in the certificate, it actually creates two files, a certificate and a key for it, okay? This is important because when we go move our databases from one server to another, we're going to need both of these files, okay? You won't need this one or this one, but you absolutely need this one and this one to move your database to another server. So let's continue on, and let's go ahead and create the database. And you got it here. Now, one thing to denote, I've turned on AES 256. You can go to Books Online, and there are several different ways that you can set your encryption. I'm not going to go over all the ways because you guys are good at Google just as well as I am, and you can go look at the different methodologies that you can turn it on with. But I'm going to turn it on to AES 256, and I'm going to encrypt it by the certificate that I just created. So let's do that. And it says, wait a minute, because I didn't get my database highlighted. A little trouble getting everything highlighted there. There we go. It was just yelling at me because it had not changed the database up here to master. So, okay, so we now have the certificate attached, but encryption is not on yet. It's there, but it's not on. The very last step you have to do is actually alter the database and then set the encryption on. Now, what does this do? What this does is actually encrypts the entire database. It is transparent. There is not one piece of code that your developers need to change to make this work, okay? So if you are needing a quick and dirty on an audit, and yes, I passed an audit on credit cards that were in the clear because I met the rule, data at rest. And I was like going, really? I can still see the credit cards all day long, okay? So this meets the data at rest rules for PCI compliance. Do I agree with them? No, I don't necessarily always agree with them. All right, so let's talk about the next level. So like I said, we turn around and we actually have, in my new job, we actually have not only full encryption on, and by the way, we changed from a third party to SQL Server because the third party was much, much, much slower and caused performance issues where SQL Server is not causing us performance issues. When I turned it on to that credit card company that I was with, we actually did not see, we used Gomez actually to measure. We would log in, go into a table, select data, come back, out and stuff. And we did not see a degradation in performance in our Gomez test scripts that actually were running like they ran 70 scripts every hour. And we didn't see a degradation in performance. Now, some people will say that you might have a 2 to 5% degradation in performance. All right, so the next thing we have, like I said, let's go to field level encryption. Now, what field level encryption is basically that an individual field can be encrypted where you cannot see the data. Now, using an individual field, you are going to have to change code, okay? So it is not transparent like the other one is. If you want to use this, you're going to have to go do some coding. So if I go turn this on, this is where I might yell at me. The key is already, it's not using the password, it says, so I must have changed the password somewhere up here. Master key. All right. If I had the right key here, and I think it's going to blow me up, so let me make sure and see if I can copy and paste the key. Create master key here. If you ever see this error, it's basically telling you that you do not have the right key. Well, let's see if I copied and paste that right. Nope, it's going to yell at me still. Anyway, what you have to do is you have to open up a master key within the database. So, check things here. Okay, going down a little bit further here. I just turned it off. Okay. All right. So you open up the encryption key, and I'm going to switch to a different screen, and I lost that desktop, so give me a moment to log back into it. I decided it wanted to go away. And we'll go over the field level encryption a little bit more. Okay, switching screens on you again. And you gotta love the circle swimming screen. And Windows 2012 server that lasts forever. There we go. All right. So creating field level encryption, you would actually create a certificate again in the database, the actual database. And then once you do that, you can actually open up and then create a symmetric key. And then once you commit a symmetric key, then you add the encryption by that key, and then you actually have the data, just like we saw a while ago, actually encrypted. Now let me let you look at that and see exactly what it looks like. I always wish Sql would read my mind and see what it says there. So let's look over here. And right here are my Social Security numbers. Now, if you ever see your Social Security numbers looking like that, you would then be able to turn around and go, but wait a minute, it's because you don't have the key open to the database. So let's open the key. And let's select it. Now you can actually see, and yes, these are fake Social Security numbers, so don't anybody just go write them down, because they're not going to do you any good. They're scrambled. This is how you actually turn around and see the data. So if you ever turn around, and I'll show that to you just one more time so you can see that. You go in and look. You don't have the key open. Someone goes, I can't see the data. Well, if they're not allowed to see the data, guess what? It's null. They cannot see the data. So that's a very, very good thing. So this is how you turn around and get the data. Now, you're saying, but wait a minute, what actually has to happen here? Well, let's look at something here for a moment. When you're adding a column to a table that's going to turn around and have encrypted data in it, when you create the column, you have to create it as a var binary 256. So create the data and then turn around and store it in the table. If we actually go and actually query this particular table and just query it without trying to open the data, you should see it. And that was a view up there, and this is going to be the actual raw table. When you query the table, that is what your data is going to look like. So you would not be able to just tell, okay, what is that Social Security number that's there? Now, one bit of advice here is that this number, you would think that if you're doing a where clause, and you're basically going, give me the Social Security number that equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That particular, when you're encrypting it, that it would use the exact same binary number. The answer is no. It's constantly changing. So if you're going to do some where clauses or searches or different things like that, and you don't want the application querying the entire Social Security number field to see one value, you might want to use a hash value and or maybe put in the last 4 digits of Social Security, narrow it down, and then search it. So just something to keep in mind if you're like, for example, in my company again, I'm trying to find, okay, I got this brand new person in the database. They have their Social Security number. Now, what are we going to end up doing is we don't want to search the entire database to find him. We want to get that down as low as possible to the lowest common denominator, either by a company number or, again, by using a hash value and have the application hash the Social Security number and then search on the hash value, not on the encrypted value, because it does change every time you encrypt it, just FYI. All right, so now we talked about the different values of the Social Security number and everything and how to do this. Now let's look at what do we do if we want to restore the database. Well, first of all, to restore the database, you're going to have the certificate on the server from where you actually are bringing that database. Remember I told you the only thing that I actually care about, so this is my Scrub server, the only thing I actually care about is the certificate. So to bring it to a different environment, what it will actually do is create another certificate with the dev and QA certificate to bring the data down and let them have that data. So if we go look at the certificate again, we actually find here's production certificate and there's dev and QA certificate. So to restore the database from production, I actually have to have the production certificate on my Scrub server, and then I can turn around and actually restore it with the QA server. All right, so let's kind of see what that's going to look like. So let's go back over here for a moment. Let's just restore this database. It's not very large. It only takes a moment to restore it. I've got my production server on there, my production certificate on there. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, to store that database. And for this purpose, let's overwrite it. Let's don't take a tail backup. Always make sure you're not in prod. Yeah, I'm on my local Scrub server. Yes, this one has access to production, so we've got to be very careful. I go and restore that. They said this database right now, this is a fairly new product, so it's not even made it up to the big gig yet. All right, so now I have a production server. So I've already put my certificate on. So the other thing I want to do is I need to make sure and restore the certificate so I can actually get it onto the server. So this command right here actually gets the production server onto, or the certificate onto this particular server. Now, to restore it, how do we do that? We are going to regenerate the database key, okay, and put it to now the dev certificate. So we're going to go here, alter the database, regen it, and this would actually be, how come I lost my connection to the database? 1 second, guys. There we go. Let's try this again. Lost the connection for a moment. All right. Now, as we're doing this, I'm going to start selecting this. Notice that the number 4 is the encryption state. And I'll talk about that for a moment here in just a second. If you'll notice up here is the state of encryption. You can actually run this over and over and over, and it's telling you right now that what it's doing is a key change in progress. If you wanted to totally get rid of it, you would have a decryption in progress. And you can watch this until it completes. Now, it should have already completed on this particular database, and it did. And that is actually how you go change a certificate. That is the same thing you go through when you do a yearly process of changing your certificate. You create a brand new one, and you come in here and just regenerate it to the brand new encryption key. Note, save your old encryption script in TFS or whatever, because if you need to get back to that data that was encrypted 2 years ago, you're going to need that encryption certificate from 2 years ago to restore that database to a server. So be sure and always script it and keep it around, because you very well may need it. And then if we just want to check it again, we check it and see what happened. Let's see if we can see our Social Security numbers. They're fake again. And right there they are, and we're good. Okay. Now, same thing you do if you're going to do the field level encryption. This is where you would go in, open up your certificate, go in and create your QA certificate, open the master key, open your symmetric key, decrypt it, add a new symmetric key, drop the old one, add the new one, and then you would have your symmetric key done. And then you can then finish scrubbing your database and take it over to a non-QA environment. So hopefully that has shown you a couple different ways to do this. So let's go back to the slides. Check my screen to see where I am here. Yep, it's got there. So if we have any questions here, we will entertain them at this time. If you have any questions on encryption.
So Tom, there was one question that was put in the Q&A by Mark. Will encrypt the data include cryptography and key management?
It does not include that. You basically have to, and your key management, I was talking about that a little bit, is the key management that you really need to take care of here, and it's not as secure as Microsoft would like you to believe. If you're really going to have to meet like strong PCI audit or whatever, you'd probably want to buy that third-party appliance to attach to it, because the only thing that I'm actually managing year over year over year is the certificate, which is the key to the data. So it really doesn't do, it's really outside the entire process. You actually turn around and have to do your own key management via a third-party product or however you want to do it. Okay.
All right, thanks, Tom. That was the only question that was there.
Okay. All right. Now, what about auditing? Well, you want to also audit access, okay? So you want to know from the access standpoint what features and objects are truly secure. You want to also, performance of access is what's mentally impacted. So you really want to turn around and, for example, only install what you really need. When you're meeting an auditor face-to-face, he wants to know, what do you have installed? You want it to be managed. When you have management, you want it to be very, very easy to manage, and you also want discoverability, to answer any audit-centric questions. Who did this? Who looked at that? I'm sure that Anthem Blue Cross is answering a lot of those questions right now. So, SQL Server Auditing, again, is only available in 2008 or later. So if you've got one of those 2005 servers, you cannot turn this on. It is enterprise level again. It can be at not only at the server level, but it can also be at the database level. So a server level audit or a database audit, and then like I said earlier, your objects can go all the way down to a table level type of things. Now, where can you log all this auditing? Well, you can log it to a file. You can log it to the Windows security log, and you can also log it to a Windows application event log. So you can log it to all those places. Now, would I advise you to go do a Windows security log or a Windows application event log? Not unless you want to get killed by your system admin. And what do I mean by that? Is that this database we were just looking at that's in my production environment that we're doing auditing on, we are getting files created very rapidly, because every time someone hits our person table where they happen to store the Social Security number, it records it. And it's every login, if that's how you want to set it up. I do want to know from an auditing standpoint who's hitting that particular server. And then we can actually turn around and I'll show you how to limit the amount of data that you're actually looking at in the log. So let's go look at that. Okay. All right. So when we're looking at auditing, here is your audits, and here is your audit specification. Now I'm going to switch because I don't audit my scrub server. And we're going to actually just look at the audit with what's going on in my production server. And you're going, oh no. Oh yeah, we're fine. All right, so let's go into server objects and management, that is. I said server objects, but it's management. All right. And I'm in a different UI, so give me 1 second here. My mouse. Okay, let's go to databases. Let's go to HRMDB. And here is my audit specification on my database. Now, if we go over here, you'll notice you can disable it, you can script it, you can put policies against it. So if I come over here and script it so we can look at it, you'll notice that there's two tables that I'm actually auditing. Okay, I'm auditing the app info, and I'm also auditing the person table. Now, if you need to audit every single login that actually hits your server or hits those tables, then what you would do is you're going to assign it to the public audit. Okay? And you'll notice that it's for server audit, data has been encrypted. So let's look at it in a different format. Let's look at it in a GUI format. And yes, I'll hit the cancel button when I get done here. Now, I only care about basically a select. I don't care who's putting the data into the database. I don't care who's deleting the data out of the database, because I do already have the server very secure from a login standpoint. So I'm really more concerned from who's actually selecting data. But you can go in here, as you notice, as you look, you can do an insert. You can do an update or delete. You can also do things like who executed this particular stored procedure. Now, I could go in with my encryption functions that's decrypting and encrypting the data. I could turn around and put an execute on that, and that would be another way actually to see that. But again, I've got that very locked down. So what I'm really concerned about is who's actually selecting and getting my encryption, my social security number out of my database. But you'll notice you can do a login group, backup restore. You can do all kinds of things in here to look and see what's going on. So let's just hit delete. Or, well, we'll do execute. That's fine. We'll just go with execute. And you'll notice you can do a database, an object, and even a schema. So you go to an object, you select here, and there's all your different things that with an execute you can go look at. And if you've got a lot of objects, you can go over here and minimize some of them so you don't have so many. So let's just go down and go, okay, we're only going to want scalar, browse the objects that you want to look at, and I just passed it. I want to say who is, let's do a set, who's getting my encrypted values. And then I could turn around again and say, I could be very, very specific to all these different roles. Or I could turn around and do what I did a while ago and say public. So now what I have here is any time someone goes and uses my function to go actually unencrypt the data out of the database at a field level, I can get it into a log that would turn around and tell me who touched my data, who's looking at it. So it's not enough just to encrypt the data. You also need to know who's accessing the data. And I could leave that on there, but I'm not going to, because one of the reasons is, let me get another server coming up. so I can actually show you the logging that we're doing, just those two items and just the selects. I want to show you the files. I want to show you what's coming out of there and how big they are. So you've got to really look at how much space do you have and make sure that you might have a separate drive for it. So let's get this server up, and while he's coming up, I'm going to pull him, see how fast he comes up for us. All right, so we're going to look at the folder where all this encryption data is going. And yes, it's in my backup folder, so he backs this up every night. And if you'll notice, this is just 1 day worth of auditing. 246 gigs worth of data. I told you the database is not very big. It hasn't even made it up to a gig yet. So it's auditing every single thing that's happening on that particular server. So anytime someone touches that. So it's very, very important as you're looking at auditing, make sure you have room for these logs. And you're like going, but Tom, you've only kept like 2 days worth of logs. Well, we scrub them off and get the important data and bring it into a table for us to review, and we keep that data and let these logs go away. So let's look at that. Let me go ahead and get out of here before we get in trouble. I don't want to do anything I don't want to do. Let me cancel out of here. But this is how you actually build your encryption on the database. Now, let's go and shut this down for a moment. I'm going to actually bring over a separate screen. So every day, and I'm keeping this information, every day we turn around and we go, there's 2 unauthorized users on that server and accessed audited data. Now, in my UAT environment, they say, well, there's no auditing. Now, we've got the same data in both systems, so both our UAT and prod, we're auditing them and encrypting them the same way so that we know what's going on. So anyway, we actually turn around and audit this information. So let's see what happens and say, well, let's see what that person actually did. So what we actually have here is I have an admin database, okay? And in my admin database, that's my database, by the way, that no one else can have, we actually turn around and audit based upon exceptions. Now, what are these exceptions? These are my service accounts. I don't want to see every bit of data that's coming out of that 2 gig log. I only want to see who's actually accessing it, whether Tom's doing it, or Jim, or Joe, or whoever the case may be. My service accounts that are coming in that are non-loggable through the UI of the application, I really don't care to see that data. I only want to see what the guys are changing. So here's that particular table. And here's where you can turn around and see who touched what. There's the select, whether the select's succeeded or not. And then you can come over here, the object, and then you've got the session. So down here you can see a user by the name of Kim Kavanaugh, and she looked at public, came in through the public, and then I can actually see her select right there of what's going on. Okay, so if I slide that over, that's exactly her query. So let's right-click on that and copy it for a moment. Now you look at that and you kind of go, wow, that's kind of different. And yeah, it is. That's she's going in with Excel, so that's one of the things that she sees there. So let me do it a different way. I actually have a nice little query that does this. And the job that goes in does all the auditing every night. In the job itself, I just go in here, let's pull this out. And let's look at it this way. And there you go, that looks a whole lot better. So Mr. Brent Sherwood, on the 16th at 18:25, when did this select? Now, when you're looking at that select, because it's a select star, it picked up the encrypted data. Now, with this audit, though, did he violate the procedure of looking at encrypted data? And the answer is going to be no, because he did not run the function to actually unencrypt the data. When he's looking at it, all he's seeing is that bar binary string. So this is what you would do for an audit, is basically go in and say, hey, who's touched my data? And you can actually go through and see updates, inserts, whatever the case you might have on that you so choose. So do we have any questions at this time on auditing? All right.
No question.
Doesn't look like we got any more.
Oh, hold on a second, Tom. No question.
Oh.
There is a comment that in SQL 2012 and 2014, every edition of SQL Server supports server level audits.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. I appreciate that information. Okay.
And that's it.
All right. Now, I just showed you basically the personal identifiable information, and then we talked about that almost every database that I'm aware of actually has this information. So you might want to be looking at who's got it, even though you might not have Social Security numbers and those type of things in there. So, all right. Now, what about policy-based management? Policy-based management allows you, let's go back one more thing to auditing. If you turn auditing on and you're like going, I'm the DBA, I'm going to just turn it off so nobody can see that I did it, well, it logs it. It does record every time that audit's turned on and off. So just FYI, you can't get around it even yourself. So, all right, especially if you send it to an event log, or, you know, a lot of times what we did was on a previous place, when we're sending that data out to a file, because there was separation of duties, we would actually not, as the DBA, we would not be allowed to get to those audit files that you saw me show you. Okay. All right. Just need to cover that a bit, and then we'll go to policy-based management here. Now, policy-based management helps you to monitor different things. The main thing I use it for is 30 days prior to expiration of my transparent data encryption certificate, it starts alerting me. I get an email. I also get the red flag by the database telling me, hey, dude, you need to do something with the certificate because it's getting ready to expire. I'll show you what that red flag looks like if you've never seen it. It's right there. It looks like a little scroll with a plus sign. So on my local server, I'm actually in violation of a policy that I've got set up on my local server. See if I switch to the right screen here, guys. Sorry. Yep, I got it. Okay. You can monitor the configurations of the database. What if in your database you wanted to turn around and say Windows NT is the only way that I can actually log into the server? You don't want it in mixed mode. You don't want SQL auth. Well, you can monitor things like that with policy-based management. What about the desired state of the server? Is the command prompt, SQL, CMD, is it off? Those type of things. What about, all the different things that have security holes, do you have them turned off? With each of us, even though today I only have 4 servers in production, it's a handful with, and you're like, oh, only 4? Yeah, only 4. But I also am the full-time developer. I'm expected to watch production at the same time as develop. So I need policy-based management to basically help me make sure that I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. If you're doing PCI and you've turned on certain policies, you can make sure that they're not modified. All right, and some PCI relevant security things you might want to look at is encryption on, is audit on, role-based access, authentication policies, and of course, was the factory default settings set to. All right, so we've talked about policy-based management, we've talked about auditing, and we've talked about transparent data encryption. The last thing we want to talk about is always on and moving data to an always-on situation. I don't have a demo on this, but basically what happens is when you're setting through the wizard and you're turning always on onto a server that has an encrypted database, it will not let you through the GUI and restore or put always on that database. You have to run the command, which you can find on Google or books online, to actually turn around and turn always on. Of course, as before, you've got to have those certificates for the database on the server to be able to restore it to a different server. So before you can even turn always on, you've got to restore it, have the certificates, and you can have it. So here, this is everything that we have that we need to look at. To kind of recap is, what do we do to protect those jewels? Now we'll go through a little bit more, and then we'll kind of go from there. Security, some things you might want to do is remove built-in administrator if it's still there. If you do have a separation of duties, then go check out this framework for signed modules. So you might need to, for example, have a non-sysadmin user, a developer, even a SQL Server developer, have him access to the system. Well, this little signed module area is where you can actually go and actually turn around and give him access to things even though he doesn't have sysadmin rights. Okay? It's a really nice little framework. I personally have never put it in. Almost did, but I haven't put it in. Okay? And then also Windows authentication, just make sure you're enforcing the password policies and everything that you need to do. Make sure that you have service accounts and domain accounts. We run everything with service accounts and domain accounts. We do not, and of course domain accounts, we're just talking about a Windows account, not a domain authorized user that can do everything. But make sure everybody has a separate login so you can track what's going on. Okay. SA should be disabled if you can disable it. If you can't disable it, then you should turn around and at least rename it. We have renamed all of ours. You're like, what? Can you rename SA? Yeah, you can rename it, and it doesn't break anything unless you actually have an application using it, and then shame on you. Okay? And then you see some other things here. File access we talked about earlier. If you're doing auditing, that you shouldn't have file access. It's talking about different, that the user should not have file access. And of course, with the later versions, SQL's done a real good job of locking all that down. And we talked about earlier too, just kind of going back over it. Don't let your sysadmins modify your audit logs. Or changes to your audit specifications should be logged. Also, whenever you're getting audited and stuff, make sure that you only install what you're using. Why put analysis services and have it running on your server if the user is not using it? You're not using it on that server. We use, for dynamic ports, if you've got information like that, we actually use fixed ports when they're dynamic, and that's mainly for an instance. An instance will automatically be dynamic and not used in 1433. All right, and then some additional things. You should be auditing login attempts, okay? And then whoever's trying to change or create databases, you might want to audit that also. And just going on down, some deletions, audit permission changes, creation of different objects if you really care to that level. So we're talking about data protection. It's about the only thing that we have talked about tonight. There's also server protection, which you'll need to get with your admins there, and your network protection, such as SSL and those type of things. So we need to make sure and get all those things protected, not just the data. We're only one piece of that puzzle. Okay? All right. Turn on SSL, and then we talked about encrypting data. All right, Brett, that's all we have for tonight. Do we have any other questions? Hello, Brett.
Hey.
Back?
I don't see any other questions in the chat log.
All right. Hopefully that gave everybody a quick overview of some things you should do when you're trying to protect that data. I know that every day it seems like, Brett, we get in the news someone else has been breached data-wise. And I'm like going, how? So and I hope to never find out. So anyway, thank you for inviting me.
All right, Tom, thank you very much for speaking. I'm going to stop recording.